I recorded a piece today. Light is broken. I think this music could very well represent some of the best work that I've done to this day, with the exclusion of what may come. Power hungry and seeking tragedy, the music incinerates all its sentimental structure at around the halfway point, and tracks into some very atonal, wild, rational, and scientific nonsense that which generates a sense of random systematic joy, similar to Nietzsche's happy monster, but usually far from Homeric this time. Wagner, black metal, well yes, Homeric tonality, the intro to Metallica's Battery, as usual. These all guide my star of influence. I create as much new sound and musical thought as afterward becomes real. An hour's length recording suited best to radical fanatics of curious avant-garde pianism, as well as the occasional or very frequent hammering of the hellish chords of Satan. Watch his break. June 18, 2012. I recorded a new piece. It is seriously one of my greatest, I think. It is one of the strangest pieces that I have done, by far. A combination, beginning of it, of tragic sentiment and hard, powerful stone marble chords. And the whole thing, by the most curious fluke, incinerates into some of the wildest, most creative atonality and characteristic Warrior of Day music. This that I've done so far. The Warrior of Day music is a genre that I had innovated and developed in the past, especially during late 2008 and most of 2009. Under the spell and influence of the general happiness that I was experiencing during those days with Eden. This kind of music is hard to describe, but if one wishes to get a better example, either listen to my latest piece, out of which I aim to upload in a few hours, or try listening to The Warrior of Day found somewhere online. The picture is of an open field, expressive of the music's general post-apocalyptic tendencies. Embla has seemingly forever had a shyness or hatred of the camera. I remember from what I knew of her constant denial of aging and maturity. She would crack a joke, perhaps during her 45th birthday, that it must be known that she is 29 years of age. Perhaps it is rather common for women to experience this kind of age denial. I never have a problem with it. I evince desire to grow older in appearance, to chisel my face into ripe maturity, with a fuller, more complete, wise look, especially effective when I would be serious or solemn. June 18, 2012. I listened to the end of a copy of Die Meistersinger during this very early morning, particularly the quintet. My dear, how beautiful and wondrous I think it is. I was in a state of tears. There are so many expressive aspects of this section that are horrifyingly spiritual, an awakening of the Holy Ghost within the listener. It's scary how one man could compose such superhuman sounds and musical ideas. I saved a particular recording of this part online somewhere, a rare recording by the conductor Kubelik, I think. Apparently, the quintet recording under this man is one of the finest. At least this is what I have generally heard. As well, I've come to agree more or less with the statement. I listened to a copy of the quintet, as well as a couple others on here, I think. The Kubelik recording stands far above and totally beautiful. I receive friend requests from business moguls and rappers as well from time to time. I take one look at them, especially the rap garbage, and instantaneously deny their request. I simply do not see any sufficient reason to preserve their presence on my profile and in relation to me. The rapper is one of the many-sided aspects and consequences that liberalism inevitably resuscitates and regenerates into form. That it is something becoming identifiable with the West itself warrants complete and immediate denial and opposition to the subject matter. Of course, the rap garbage is not the source or cause of degeneracy in the West. It is merely an effect, a very dangerous and enormous effect, of the criminal, post-Christian liberal running rampant in parliaments and congresses of mob-run, pusillanimous democracies. He sources from the Christ sources from India, but nevertheless the Christ is considered the root and fundamental cause of the transition of the spirit of the Mediterranean man, especially the Teutonic, to depravity. He who is always so observably and evidently liberal in form, character, and intellect. Somehow the Christian religion has become so perfectly suited for his very vague, abstract, slow, and hard to understand philosophy. The Germanic languages give lenience and aptitude to that kind of dubiety, due to the natural and a priori depth, gravitas, and profundity of the German intellect. These are specific ideas, depth, gravity, profundity, and such, to be avoided if resolving to counter and divest the liberal Christian of all or whatever he is worth. Well, it is bleak indeed, the situation in Germany, the West itself, and such. Unfortunately, these little methods and systems to adopt that counter effectively any opposition from the left, especially if applied correctly, efficiently, and wisely. The right is undeniably true in spirit. It just needs a sense of justification through illumination or legitimate expounding. Otherwise, the leftist, who is thousands of years younger and more inexperienced than the master moralist, gains his support and existence, which is by far something to be shunned and denied, if a return to sane civility and instinctive harmony with cultivated organic spirits is ever to be remembered. June 18, 2012. I have a long history of fanatic zeal over this movie, Conan the Barbarian, the 1980 version, of course. I dreaded the thought of a remake of this, which unfortunately came true rather recently. I immediately looked it over with disregard. I grew out of my Little Warrior era during early 2009, but prior to this year, especially during later 2006 and general 2008, I was crafting leather gear and posing in swords in nearly every one of my photos. A lot of this stemming from my zeal and inspiration from this movie, but of course among other interests too, especially Thomas Gabriel Warrior and Celtic Frost. There is a wealth of Nietzschean power, who's Heimdallr's son, particularly so in Nordic pantheon mythology, name, title, appellation, way, particularly so name withheld for the time being, for a time, particularly so during instance or final instance. Therefore, there is a wealth of Nietzschean power, philosophical content embedded in basically every aspect or line of dialogue of this film. I say this as when I started to finish editing my piece. Earlier today, I turned on the television and the film just happened to be on. It's the first time I've ever seen this movie on television. It being rather understandably hard to edit and make suitable some of the scenes for a family audience. I watched some of it but didn't complete it. It evoked so many parallels with the music that I had recorded today. I was inspired to the point that I made use of a picture of Conan himself, king of Aquilonia, sitting on his distant and remote throne, blanketed with scarlet and violet fog, caught up in his thoughts. It's very amazing and hard to produce a photograph that covers my latest music videos. I'm probably going to watch this film sometime tonight, as I do have a copy of it, along with Conan the Destroyer, the sequel. The second film is good enough, to be fair. However, it stands nowhere in comparison to the original Barbarian film, that of which was the one that Hollywood outlaw John Milius directed himself. The other film not done so by him. A very interesting man, a fanatic, accomplished military weapon collector, among various other noble activities and ideas. June 18, 2012. We did mention Embla's 45th birthday, as it was during this age of hers that I last truly and really knew her personally, and had lost so much singular contact with her as it would become customary for the rest of my late youth and early adulthood. Fortunately for now, I maintain more of a serious relationship with her, although even today it seems rather dubious. But nevertheless, she and I remain in touch every now and then. John Milius is likely a neoconservative, as my friend says. Now that I remember this, it seems right. His politics would probably be disagreeable with our own, as he is likely not very radical in his convictions, or far-reaching enough, or wisely insightful in his plans for a Western revival, even if this is not possible to achieve, but with a strong perseverance in doing something, completing a very difficult, though strongly desired goal, is always a thought to commend, as it signifies a sense of participation in purposeful activity in an otherwise illusory, fleeting, and meaningless world. This piece might is broken, by the way, seems very awake and alive this time. Much action and energy was deliberately used to create a more fiery and essentially living piece, especially so this time. It becomes very strange as the minutes follow. Kubelik's recording of the Die Meistersinger Quintet is breathtaking listening to it, I think. I've been desiring for quite a few years to purchase a Furtwängler recording of any Wagner opera. I once came close to acquiring his Die Meistersinger recording, done so during the 1940s. I believe it was fragmentary or not fully complete, but unfortunately the order fell through as the copy was out of stock at the time. I love listening to the older conductors of the Bayreuth revival, Knappert's Bush being another one of my favourites, particularly his Parsifal recordings. I own both the 1954 and 1962 recordings, wherein Josef Greindl sings the Gurnemanns in the former recording, and Hans Hütter that of the latter. Both are excellent in their special and distinct ways. Greindl sounds very angry and hard, which I like. Hütter sounds very deep and universally expressive. I constantly listen to both of these recordings while I drive around my car, with the windows rolled down and the music turned up, just to the right volume so that it is not so loud that it would literally offend the ears of other people, but loud enough so that it can be heard and shown to others reflectively that such beautiful music really exists, that stands alone, in opposition to so many postmodern, failing and primitive aspects of the West, that the music expresses refinement, beauty, and truth, aspects so uncommonly seen in the public life and knowledge of citizens. At times a call to arms in defense of the Occidental spirits, at other times it compassionately remembers the state that the West is in, and is likely going to finish itself within, resting toward the ground with a sense of mercy and understanding the whole embodied history of 2,500 years of the most serious, intelligent, inquisitive cultural spirit the world has ever known. June 19, 2012. I do have some regular contact with Embla. Perhaps I wasn't being so clear on this. Just the other day I'd spoken to her on the phone for around a quarter of an hour, catching up, inquiring about each other, and finding out whether we are doing well in our affairs and such. We are on good terms, and I think that she wants me to call her more frequently. I simply do not do this as much as she and I would desire, thus I remain with good intention to act upon this and call her more frequently. I have had this funny thought of what it would be like to have a phone conversation with my friend, with Frigg, if ever one of these days. I would be so happy to hear her voice for the first time, and having become acquainted with the simple customs and mannerisms of her character, as she would be doing so of mine, that I think would be most memorable for me. I hope that it would be so for her as well. I just recall in my mind whether the call itself would be expensive to make, the communication between being across countries and overseas, unfortunately. If only we were closer in approximation, I think things would be different and much easier. Perhaps we would meet up one day if the travel considerations would prove reasonable. I still dream of visiting England one day, and if ever I do, I will tell her that I am doing so. Then we would finally arrange a little plan to get to meet up after all. I think sincerely that this would be so lovely. Anyway, I've decided to upload all sorts of files from my computer, music files, photographs, videos and such, onto an online storage website that basically saves with a limited amount allowed per account. I'm creating several accounts to my computer containing hundreds of files that I desire to upload and store. These files online, and if the user's computer crashes and loses its internal memory, then merely re-establishing the operating system and heading over to this website, the user could download virtually all that he has saved and does not have suffered from any loss of information ahead of his time. The time to upload the files personally I have much, and can be demanding. I'll say that upon my consideration the knowledge of a Western revival, I deliberate considerably on this aspect as well. However, for almost most of the time, I tend to reason it negatively, so as I recognize that all life and plurality and such eventually come to an end, definitely and without exception, so that along with the insight that the Western spirit is forever deep and mystical, thus ultimately effeminate, matriarchal, and suicidal, with the logic that this type of harvest ultimately reaps dead production, and with the consideration that everywhere observable in the mind of the West is seen hatred of the patriarch, the very root and fundamental archetype that preserves and subsists with the civilization's creation and duration, along with other considerations thus observed in the mind of the Western spirit, nihilism, fatalism, carelessness, disinterest in serious and true affairs, mockery and partisan individualistic interest, so on, so on. The list is endless. It is something plural, that very unpreferable philosophical principle that invites the deception and delusion of coming into being and passing away, something that goes against the timelessness, agelessness, motionlessness, fact of Godhead, imperialism, kingship, natural totality, and so on. I think that it is reasonable to affirm the position of denial of the will to live, or to revive, to rather settle oneself in the establishment of a more internal and solitary perspective, one that knows the impossibility of now placing a hope in salvation of the soul through external societal means, but rather does not seek this method of salvation, but instead prefers a sense of individualistic, often solipsistic, very selfish, in the drier sense of the word, approach to functional and scientific ends, possibly striving for salvation, if understanding and agreeing upon Buddhist scripture, or possibly appearing in spirit to achieve so much justice, harmony, causalistic balance as one can ultimately achieve. I prefer this latter more fully. I have desired to hear a recording of Birgit Nilsson, that is a full-length one of any particular Wagner opera. I remember having watched a video online of her singing very certainly with so much ease during a set rehearsal of Solti's Ring recording, I believe it was. She was standing in the back of the orchestra and proved very capable in her skill to sing very loudly, yet with control and great enunciation of her words. I think that the greatest female singer of them all, at least the one that I desire the most greatest to hear a full recording of, is Kirsten Flogstad. I recall that we may have discussed our thoughts on this significant singer earlier before, that though I still wish to hear her in full voice, I think that it would be such a gift. Perhaps Tristan und Isolde is promising enough to try a listen. June 2012. One of my friends has already, in fact, listened to some of Light is Broken and wrote to me online about it. She tells me that she doesn't think that she's heard me play a piece so forcefully ever, that it is very powerful music and such. I conceded to her and mentioned that even I was a bit concerned that the chords may continue to be so loud that it might turn off listeners due to the rising pain experienced from it. But I also explained that the music does not perpetually sound fortissimo, that there are drastic changes throughout, including some softer sections, more thoughtful and reflective moments, and so on. I'll continue to try and find a good recording of Flogstad. By the way, the recording that my friend recommends of Ferdinand Engler's Tristan und Isolde sounds like a great contender. June 21, 2012. I wholly believe that this music is very powerful. In fact, I was somewhat concerned whether or not that it would eventually become painful to the ears of others over time because of the prolonged fortissimos, the accents and such throughout much of the piece. But it does change drastically throughout the session. At times there's less power and more thoughtfulness, silliness of the keys, very wild atonal creativity, nothing that of which focus so much on loudness or such heaviness as the piece otherwise constantly expresses. June 21, 2012. It wore skirts all the time. I absolutely loved that. I think that it is forever so preferable. I think that it is forever so preferable over a woman wearing pants. The spirit of a woman wearing a skirt speaks definitely of her worth, as though a cool wind blows from the north, or that her lips or mouth are represented and expressed appropriately by the formless universal idea of her beautiful expression, found so by the skirt that seems to signify the number 3, or 0 even, in some obscure way. June 22, 2012. It seems that I've stunned my friend with numerology. I didn't mean to state that the number 3 represents a particular kind of object, that is, dresses and skirts, without elaboration. I see that whatever knowledge she has at present of the meaning of numbers in the Pythagorean Kabbalistic sense might be wanting in a fuller degree. The knowledge of numerology that I have is rather refined, I think. I have spent very much time beginning around mid-2007, lessening the force and vivacity behind the study of it around 2010, as, as every aspect that was concerning my philosophy changed radically during this time, becoming fuller, deeper, more mature. There was this growing obstruction to the practical mentioned in typical usage of the science, in place of it being commonly very long-winded sentences, full of conceptual philosophic terms, and overall abundant depth and gravity of tone and structure. I know that it may seem difficult to grasp and comprehend something like what a number such as 3 might mean. That is what symbolism and objectivity found in nature and the intellect might relate, connect, and coalesce together with this particular number. I tell her here that this number 3 is a feminine number, dark, water-based, nurturing, and motherly, understanding, Saturn correlated, and so on. I thoroughly believe that the Kabbalistic system is irrefutable, so long as the answers divined from it are faithful to the very system's unseen, a priori intentions. A sufficient knowledge of the system, applying its usage correctly to things, seems effectively life-changing and very transforming of spiritual perception. This is at least how it has affected me. As well, I do recall some of the testimony of others found through books pertaining to the subjects that I have read. As it goes for my music, I had the strong urge to head into town and record this full-length piece, focusing on as much on Homeric, barbarian, Nietzschean sounding tonality as I could desire. Unfortunately, the college was closed for the day. It opens the other day. This is when I will likely act upon my wish. Today I was so desirous of finding a way to record on a piano anywhere in my vicinity, at some college of course, otherwise playing at warehouses or stores would just be awkward, especially recording a piece set up with a mixer. That I researched several colleges, coming up with a good contender after turning down many others. I finally found one college that contains a performing arts department and practice rooms. I went ahead and drove 3 or 4 cities west of my town, down into the valley, parked in a neighboring neighborhood suburb, as otherwise I would need to spend money on a parking permit, which would be rather superfluous to my expenses. Walked with my backpack and books to the college, wandering around a bit, practically becoming lost from its immense foreign size. Fortunately, I came across some signs during my walk, eventually directing myself toward the music department. I found it, peered into what appeared to be the practice rooms, attempted to open the door. It was locked and closed to my misfortune. Quite a waste it all was doing this, I think, but at the same time I like to view it as a little kind of adventure, one that gets me out of the house during the day and to experience some of the sunny sides of civil society, however sad and degraded much of this civil state has currently become. I was wanting to record at that college particularly. I think that the whole sound, atmosphere, and idea of peace being recorded there would present it all as something new and a change of setting. In sum, one will likely see another new piece of mine by this Viorte, potentially a very powerful one. I feel the need within me to embellish, elaborate, and dominate even further the strange, powerful, wild musical thoughts, method, and tonality that was founded upon with The Might is Broken piece, June 22, 2012. I do not know too much about Stockhausen, especially, although I do know that he had pioneered or at least developed a style of electronic music that was apparently very popularly received in the mid-20th century. Ligeti, at least for what he has composed for 2001, A Space Odyssey, is a great favorite of mine. I absolutely love the music from this film. The atmospheres, Lux Eternal, the piece on Jupiter, I forget the name of it now, unfortunately. The music sounds so groundbreaking and transcendent from all of the common practice period codes of art that determined so many of the composers from the past to create music in such a way, which is by no means a bad thing, but Ligeti's new sounds were at least a breath of fresh air, as it seems to be. I do think that this piece, Might is Broken, is my finest piece so far. I love that Frigg has devoted herself to listen to the thing twice. This shows to me much loyalty and love. I commend her very compassionately and reciprocatively with my own love for her. Perhaps this music pays homage to contemporary sound, but I prefer to think that much of it is truly pioneering and original in its own way. I really don't think that there is anything too much identical or already developed in other music as this music so far shows. I've received a comment once earlier back in 2009 that the person had never heard anything like it. I think that you have made new music. Other people that listen to that piece, despite the paucity of commentary or typical infrequent responses, seem to potentially agree with this statement as well. I'm flattered to find the idea that I write like a European, coming from Frigg especially. It should be obvious to her and to others that I've always looked transcendently away from the common, barbaric, and stupid nature of American speech and desired a construction of words far from it, and indeed continental European conceived. It is a pleasant confirmation to hear these words from her, as though that I have achieved sufficiently enough intelligent vision of legitimate European speech that I have for so long desired. June 23, 2012. Here's what I think a rather complicated writing done this morning, initially conversing with a good friend. Thoughts on the lotus wand. I think that I'm figuring out more the reality of fractals and imagining them with better ease, applying them to ideal conceptions, as well as Leibniz's theory of monads, for so long a time as has left me baffled. It seems to be coming of age for me now. I stumbled upon a whole new conception of everything in this writing, a particular section I desire to quote. Matter does not exist or move, as Parmenides has it, that all the universe is one total enclosed sphere within an infinite void, with the absolute center being the most potent aspect of God. In this particular universe, sphere is akin to molecule, an atom, capable of reverse magnification. To zoom out further enough from our perception, we will inevitably see another atom somewhere within this infinite void, one that composes of another universe, possibly another soul, that with enough distance of perception, a clear expression will be made up and composed, that an image and representation of an entire universe is to eventually be in itself complete. The spheres of the prior dominion of universes compose up as the atoms of this present more super universe, creating its own distinct, unique space, time, and causality, its own absolute center, again the most potent aspect of God, so much as it appears within this universe sphere. Its own nebulae, galaxies, star systems, planets, and spiritual worlds, where life potentially exists in its forms, in contrast to the prior described smaller makeup of universal spheres and atoms. This procedure outward to further and further universes, composed of prior universe atoms, appears infinite. This much, I think, serves as a reasonable introduction to this writing. June 24, 2012. I don't really enjoy Schoenberg too much, at least as much as of his music, for what I've heard so far, seems rather logical and bound by unnecessary laws and rules from his serial ideas. But Berg, from what I recall, was heavily influenced by Wagner, and I think, again, I do have only partial knowledge of his work, that his music can appear pretty intense and beautiful when he composes more sentimental music, as opposed, of course, to mental or rational music. But Ligeti seems to remain a king in the contemporary realm of atonal music, especially his compositions for the Space Odyssey movie that we have mentioned. I absolutely love this film. It's very excellent work. I love pretty much any Kubrick film. He's another favorite film director of mine. I like The Shining too. I find it to be so extremely intense and worthy a horror film. Shostakovich, I'm very vague with his knowledge of currently. I had a friend at my college that loved and adored his work. I think that my friend's musical influences were very respectable, thus with his recommendation of Shostakovich, I think that's this I think that this composer's music must be something worth checking into sometime, and especially that coming from Frigg too, that she intends to enjoy his music. I have a new piece recorded and uploaded from earlier today. I think that is precisely what I have been intending to do, and it represents perfectly the direction of sound that we both know that I have been aiming for during these past few days. A short description of the piece is written online already. I see it as extremely powerful, like Might is Broken. Again, the first half of it is Wagnerian, and more or less with a romantic influence. Then soon the antediluvian, Conan the Barbarian, contemporary atonal influences take form as I then begin to feel more warmed up and comfortable at the piano. Also, I do think that a composer's music, even the greatest, can thoroughly be formed and produced at times without any or hardly any external influence, at least without much influence knowledge from the realm of practical experience. This thought means in a correlation with an a priori knowledge and a pure, clean slate approach to action and conduct, in this case music, where by the method of either blotting out thoughts of experience and a posteriori knowledge, or by merely approaching and performing music with a pure sense of imagination and intention, with the sincerity of knowledge being actualized, that I think a musician or composer, or in any case a subject that thinks and performs an action, can consequently create a truly unique sound, original and fresh, because of his detachment, liberation, and objectivity from the subject's former experience. I think that this practice can be wholly possible to achieve legitimately, if not frequently, then merely occasionally, or with uncommon moments that demonstrate the originality and unseen creativity of the performer, in this case the musician, as it signifies and correlates with myself and my kind of music that I'm holding now in question. June 25, 2012. A good recording is done here this morning. Tragical Flesh and Barbarian Steel. I think that the piece is a great summary of my musical thoughts as they are directed right now. Again, like Might is Broken, it is very powerful, certain, and with much forte. Halfway through, it descends into very atonal contemporary style. There's plenty of influence. In the beginning, Wagner as usual. The later, a barbarian sound is affected, drawing inspiration from the antediluvian music of Conan the Barbarian, as well as allusion to certain metal impressions that I've always enjoyed in their might and transcendence of spirit. June 25, 2012. Idun had experienced a bad car accident when she was younger. In fact, the car rolled over several times, and the roof of it was completely destroyed. She and the other persons in the car emerged safe, fortunately, but ever since this, she recalled to me that she does have a fear of driving, that sometimes when I was driving with her, I would be a little too close to the car in front of us on the freeway. She would request me to slow down and to create a greater distance between the car ahead of us in order to be more safe, logically. I think that it is so astounding to hear that once in the now rather distant past, people in Britain, like Frigg's father and grandfather and such, would do such things like remove their hats when a funeral procession would cross by, whether they knew the person or not. It is something so very noble and admirable that only a greatly involved community may routinely, popularly, and effectively achieve something of this kind. Never so with mass multiculturalism and tremendous partisan, selfish, and oblivious individual interests that manifest in such abundant portions of the West to this day. Such noble days as are mentioned above are truly done and finished for many years to come. Our soul must await with patience for a revival, if it in some way, the Teutonic form and spirit remains through its dark ages manifest, persevered, and survived sufficiently throughout the total destruction and degeneration that the Western civilization is currently soon to undergo and experience in its completion. It is swiftly evident that his biological form and physical character is slowly dying and disappearing without any further trace, procreation and preservation, to continue objectifying his identity. This cannot be denied by even the most delusional of liberals. June 25, June 25, 2012. I see that, along with her father and some others, that the unique civic virtues we were discussing, lifting the hat off to women and such, are still modestly in effect, if only by a few remaining people, while the walls of the West crumble apart from this and elsewhere, the Occidental public become ever the more oblivious and indifferent to all and any societal standard. June 26, 2012. There seems to be two halves to the structure of this piece, Tragical Flesh and Barbarian Steel. with the first 30 minutes being rather warming up and Wagnerian. Then the music grows comfortable and gives way during the final 30 minutes to unique contemporary sounds, that is the characteristic atonality, wildness, barbarian and imperial Romanesque power and such. I've not seen A Clockwork Orange as of yet, though I've heard of it for years and know known people have seen it. I see that Frigg truly seems to enjoy Russian classical music, Shostakovich, Prokofiev, Rachmaninoff, Scriabin, and so on. I'm rather familiar with Rachmaninoff's works. I played many of them when I was younger, particularly his preludes, as well as attempting both his second and third piano concertos. June 26, 2012. I'm selected today for a trial at jury service. My name was on the list when I was there at the courthouse this morning. We are currently on break for about 3.5 hours. I'm at home right now. When after this, the jurors and I will return and begin our cases. I didn't expect to be selected. It is usually rare to be done so, but I was selected. I think that serving for a case might be interesting. It, of course, will give me something new to experience. June 27, 2012. It turns out that after my little 3.5 hour break from a jury service before the court cases started, I returned to the court on time. Then the judge came into the large waiting room and informed us that his cases were cancelled for the day, that we were free to go for another year, so that we were finished with our obligations for the time being. It was a rather happy moment, as I was becoming a little nervous as to performing the task of being a member on the jury, satisfactory and sufficiently enough, but it seems that now another year must proceed through before I will likely be called into jury service again. June 28, 2012. I agree with much of Thiers' thoughts. His societal ideas are very aware of the Western decline and the need for European grammatics to adapt and reconstruct accordingly with strength and wisdom and such, in order to create the means of influence to other fellow comrades, thus to pull the remaining subjects of the community out of the darkness and degeneracy that the Western spirit is otherwise obviously falling into. June 29, 2012. There's a great abundance of history behind Beersom, and many of the other musicians a part of this circle, ones that were all involved with the second wave of black metal. Personally, I think that the first wave was greater, wilder, more original and honest, with bands like Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, Bathory, Venom, early Slayer, and such. These bands were generated during the early to mid-80s, wherein the second wave came into prominence during the early 90s, especially during 1993, while death metal was already quite popular, at least in the underground terms. No commercial airplay was permitted or observed with this style of music. I think that Frigg will like much of Beersom indeed. He has created quite a few albums over the years, commencing around 1990 or 1991, I think. Dead Som Gongvar is one of my favorites, from 1993, a year or so before he was to be imprisoned for murder of a fellow musician and church arson. There's quite a story behind this person. He does have his own official website, with plenty of writings on there that express his ideas. If this is interesting for her, which I think that it should be, then I think it would be worth a try to listen to him and read some of them. June 29, 2012. It is horrible indeed, having observed some of the filth that literally every art form insinuates and incorporates during this sad, withered Western epoch, even in the most pristine and valuable of subject matter. Sometimes I see a commercial on the television that is supposed to portray Vikings or grammatic barbarians in general, and lo and behold, there are Negroes incorporated into the tribe, as though that they are one with them. That as though it were an historically accurate and factual idea by the commercial's representation of this paradox. Other times I see a Baroque feast at a table with the Europeans in their court costumes and powdered wigs, and alongside this, as though it weren't ever a glaring inconsistency, there are Negroes beside the Europeans, elevated to the same rank as them as well, in the same kind of costume and notion of respect as them, as though the ethical conditions that were really affecting history at this time were entirely scrapped and distorted, that subsumed and recreated as fact. It's a power given and assumed thought that is totally in contradistinction to true history, that the Negro is a part the same position that with the white man during that particular, very principled Baroque period in time that the commercial is trying to convey. The liberal will never understand history. Also, I remember a female homosexual, Ellen DeGeneres, playing the part of God Almighty in a film or play of some sort, again entirely opposed and glaringly offending to the religion of Judaism that in itself tries to remain detached and dispassionate of any politically correct and liberal encounters. The delusional European merely insults the timeless, tried and tested religious intention with the fallacious stupidity of their very small political vanity, thinking that they are serving a good cause, when in reality nothing could be so far from the truth. The liberal instead shows himself to the rest of the greater world that he is an insult, an offense, a joke, and a buffoon, for thinking that his distortions of perception serve to create something good or world-embracing, a gluttonous and conflicting term that they frequently like to use. The Western condition is truly despicable. July 2, 2012. Once again, I agree with Frege almost completely, only that with my understanding of prior societal idealization, I would not forget to include the Romans and the Greeks. I see that she has changed her channel earlier to reflect the Louis XIV film, accompanied by the music of Lully. I loved watching it. I observed a kind of thematic, idealistic repetition going on throughout the video, where points of reference and imagery would return rather commonly. As well, the music has a kind of redundancy, but is not something undesirable in any way to the senses and imagination. Again, the court culture, the costumes, the postures and gestures, and so on within the video are always likable to me and express a highly advanced society merging into some of its highest grades of evolution with its maturing great science, art, understanding of religion, history, poetry, architecture, and so on. I feel as though it is legitimate to say to myself that I miss those times, as though I had lived it and were once a part of it. I think very likely that I once was. July 2, 2012. It makes me feel so glad that she is studying some of these things about here, to my rejoicing that she finds affinity with him, his character, ethics, intellect, artistic ambitions, and such. Although I do relate that the common raspy vocals of black metal, especially during the second wave, can become rough, tiresome, and somewhat annoying, I typically grow weary of a song almost as soon as the vocals settle in and nothing much original is left to the imagination, as so much of the song, a part of the extreme black metal genre, is repetitive and simplistic, an extreme far cry from the creativity and very arduously constructed tonalities and modulations of classical music, something that bears for a more refined apprehension of a much greater affection. I think that she is very correct when she speaks of a rebirth of the Occident becoming further, more distant, and ultimately impossible from attaining in its actualization in reality, due to the browning of the human race by miscegenation and biological dissimulation. For there is an evident and easily demonstrable proof that the white man is bearing hardly any more children than in contrast with other darker races, that with time this procession naturally succeeds further, along with every destruction, or at least denigration of cultural value in the West. The white man disappears eventually from enough outbreeding and overpopulation of the foreigner. He disappears and will likely never be found again on the face of the earth. This is certainly not something to hope for, as it is one of the greatest losses, taking into consideration every accomplishment, innovation, progression, discovery, ideal, and so on and so forth, that he has enforced and ordained, in stark contrast to the majority of the planet, that either imitates and mocks his archetypal desires, or merely subsists in a feral state, oblivious to the enlightenment and universal construction of the world around him. I do believe that, if ever this were to happen, that the white man were to die out, that the world would at first and for a lengthy time to be sure, fall into a darkness of form relative to the white man's memory, and that with the succession of history, the condition would be as though the same during the earlier ages prior to the white man's form becoming or evolving white, that inevitably with enough time in biological evolution, so long as the earth is not obliterated by a cosmic explosion or suffers from an effect of a supernova, various individual forms of men with white flesh will here and there conceive, likely as before, in the northern regions of the upper hemisphere, because of the unique cold and shaded circumstances of its climate. Soon enough the population of white forms obtains greater affluence, only insofar as the geological circumstances permit of the accidental kind of nature to happen. Otherwise, with brown political strategists, with a possible world government of some sort in effect, it can be speculated that these white forms will be immediately hushed and denied, in order to block from their memory any subsequent experience between them and the other white forms that they ever after oppose. There are several possibilities and theories available that will guide the potential outcome of a Western revival, if it will ever happen again, which it is impossible to know right now in this epoch whether it will occur as such or not. I, of course, desire to achieve it, therefore I maintain my philosophy as it is, adapted and reformed to benefit a greater sense of understanding from others. Otherwise, such hopes and dreams of Western revival are immediately dismissed and rejected, as the liberal menace is so imminent in this current epoch. Nothing direct, exposed, or naked in sentimental form can be shown to these others, who otherwise immediately disrespect their forefathers, simply for these ancestors are feared, misunderstood, or too lofty for the ordinary postmodern mind to comprehend. He is now wholly delusional and distracted by technology and entertainment, indifferent to contributing any advancement or communicative participation to his race, among 1,000 other dubious and vague, escapist and fatalistic reasons that he gives in order to opt out and deny much, if not all, of his participation in his spirit's consciousness, the consciousness that is his Western spirit. July 3, 2012. Very glad to see that Tyr's presence is greatly affecting Frigg's mind, now that she has been looking into his theories and such a little more. I have some knowledge of Charles Manson, actually, but nothing too much to credibly conclude a judgment of any of his philosophy as so far. I do see that he is rather mad or insane, having watched several videos of his trial, his past conduct during his murders, his condition as it is today when during interviews and such. July 4, 2012. There's a particular portrait of Napoleon. I hadn't known that he does indeed share some commonality of traits with the character of the form of my own, especially the long hair, as Frigg has artfully selected this image, and thereby pointed it out. I'm enthusiastic over this image that she has on our channel at the moment. I think that he is very handsome in this appearance. I do think, similarly as she does in regard to this little insight that she has of him, that he and I share a similar identity in some way, shape, or form. July 5, 2012. When I was driving around town earlier today, a couple of women walking on the side of the street shouted to me while I was in my car, I like your mustache," as I thought it was rather curious, possibly insulting, very strange and awkward at first. However, I soon began reasoning that the sentence could have been intended as something of a compliment, just only through very crude and blatant means. This is the first time I've received expression from others in regard to my facial hair that it was pointed out in whatever way by the complete strangers. I later came to enjoy that moment and thought that they willed it positively after all. July 6, 2012. Here is some further speculation into the strange and curious theory that I have been thinking over and developing over the past month, with more emphasis on the tree of life this time rather than the zodiac, God, reason, and infinity. It is so far incomplete, it seems to change direction over even between sentences, but mistakes made with impunity are reasonable to be expected in this kind of new ground and pristine exploration. Know yourself. July 7, 2012. I hope that I will one day get my 2 books published. I must get this task finished. I'm currently rereading my second book and fixing any noticeable errors, as well as giving the book chapter titles at the appropriate sections. After I'm through with doing this, I must, with a newfound energy and motivation, commence my search again for an agent. I do have many possible contenders available. Agency names found in several lists from websites. I want to be thorough and totally comprehensive in my query letter when I send it to them, to make certain that my book is presented as professionally as possible. That doing this improves my potential of finally obtaining an agent. July 7, 2012. I'm going to try and record a piece tomorrow, as similar to Tragical Flesh in Barbarian Steel and Might is Broken as I can get it, evolving and elaborating on these pieces of ideas, as I will be thinking about performing in such a way during the following day before finally recording. I wanted to head down and record on last Wednesday, but unfortunately it was the 4th of July holiday. The college was closed for the remainder of the week. It finally opens tomorrow on Thursday, July 8, 2012. Some music is recorded from earlier today, the Romanesque and chromatic spirit of antiquity. is the longest piece that I've done by far. I had incidentally lost track of time during the recording of it, clocking in at a little over 17 minutes. Roman fanfare themes are explored as far as they can suit the imagination. Barbarian warlord tonality, from whatever means I can draw it from. Basil Polydorus and his music from Conan the Barbarian being the great influence. Also some metal riffs are adapted into the sounds, as well as some fast-paced atonal innovation being developed. Epic in scope, I'll concentrate, practice abstractly, mentally prepare for the performance of the recording at least several days before setting down to play it, in order for it to be produced and presented as best and ideal as possible. Although I always return to the instruments to improve further. July 9, 2012. A new piece is recorded. It is all finished and uploaded onto the profile in 4 parts. The piece is the lengthiest that I've done by far. It clocks in at a little over 17 minutes. I love how it has turned out. I think that it shares a part of some of my best music, though I won't spoil too much of what it sounds like. But the will and drive behind the whole thing is very grand in vision. I imagine Roman fanfares and barbarian warlord tonality, found especially in the soundtrack to Conan the Barbarian, among other films similar. Ben-Hur calls to mind as well for the moment. The 4th of July holiday to me is rather trivial, as so many aspects of this country, along with the West itself, but predominantly many aspects of America I do care less for, and instantaneously observe that its values refer to concealed intentions of total devolution of the human spirit, disgrace of cultural attainments, and revenge for the Roman patrician and patriarch. Entire slave morality, found brewing 2,000 years ago, still remains today in this condition in an even more volatile and extremely dangerous state, albeit the value system is entirely transformed, suited to fit the mouthpiece of the proletariat, that the Christian ethics in their essence are found easily communicable and persuasive by the stupidest and lowest of herdsmen. But we do not fall for their cunning, to be sure. Every drop of their element is scourged and whipped dry, in order to purge the soul from criminality and poison, and to reconvene the will to power, and participate in the true and upright evolution of the human race, seen through political, individual, metaphysical, scientific, religious, and artistic terms. July 9, 2012. I'm a fast typist indeed, especially so when I was younger. I held the class record in basically every computer class that I was a part of. I think that this has something to do with the configuration and assortment of my nervous system, especially to have developed these nerves through the piano at a young age, and thus applying the exercise and experience to typing on a computer keyboard. July 9, 2012. Frigg is a great artist, in my eyes if not her own. Her spirit is universally artistic. I can see this easily through many aspects of her character. Her intellect douses me, as she says mine does of her, but she is an exceptionally wonderful person, and it is a prize of mine to have been found. We will preserve our friendship eternally and everlastingly. There's no other way. Her character is so rare, yet so compatible with mine at the same time. July 10, 2012. I know that she is extremely knowledgeable of cultural objects and forms of art and so forth. I see it easily in her writing. She is certainly a thousand degrees above and higher from the corruption of a cultural Marxist. She is infinitely greater than this. Both her character and intellect are great for the essential knowledge that it associates with, not by chance whatsoever, but by reason and correct necessity. July 11, 2012. It is becoming much hotter here, all throughout the day and nights, as the summer season succeeds. I see that very powerful storms have been plaguing her area during this time. I too think that storms are wonderful. I love experiencing the rain pounding on the roof of the house, the roar of the thunder in the distance, and so on and so forth. July 12, 2012. The piece is fierce indeed. I understand that in the past the music I would play might have been rather tame, reserved, and tedious, as though I were cautious or careful to play the keys, so that, with growing recognition of this past error, I now transform and advance my style tenfold, in order to overcome that quietness and timidity of the past, particularly referencing the times from later 2006 until more or less 2009, 2010. The result is a powerful, fast, and intelligent sound, confident and affirmative of strength, desperate to move on or to proceed to further musical elaborations, and inclusive of originality and innovation in a very personal, peculiar, and unique way. July 12, 2012. The music that I wish to play for now is wholesome in intelligence, with attempts to subtract all or any sleepy or dormant emotions in the sounds, in order to create a more brilliant and philosophically commanding piece. I love that Frigg's husband, Yggdrasil, finds no surprise in, by chance, happening to hear my playing while she was listening to me. He possesses knowledge of my writing already, and now my music, and in both categories he is praiseworthy, but evidently honest. I feel much friendliness for him, more and more. He's a very kind and remarkable man. If I were to explain as to how I know which key ahead of time to execute appropriately, then I think that my a priori knowledge of it alone would be somehow revealed through otherwise inexplicable means. Basically, at least right now in my evolutionary dialectic, it would be too difficult to give an honest, clear, and reflective example. August 12, 2012 notes. Perhaps it is through the development and practice of perfect pitch. July 13, 2012. Much of the time that I spend here is done through reading, playing around on a few games, watching online videos, and emailing Frigg that I have made, a good friend that I have made over the past year, one from Britain, and almost identical to me in her philosophy, political ideology, ethics, artistic ambitions, and so forth. The only difference being that she is rather more direct, blatant, and exposed in her ideas, wherein I tend to conceal my motivations more frequently, in order to not scare away potential followers or listeners. She's much older than me, too, in her early 50s. She's married, too, but these realities do not affect either her or I. Our relationship is platonic, anyway. I have a library of books that is growing month by month. I plan to soon possess almost every principal book of nearly every Western philosopher. As well, recently I've purchased several Eastern Indian philosophy and religion books while studying Hinduism and Brahmanism. I tend to read at least every day, though there are indeed days when I give myself a break. This tends to recover some intellectual energy, and later make the process of visualizing aspects of various books, words, more simpler to apprehend. July 13, 2012. I had some ideas in mind that which I could in fact write about in regard to music theory in general. I'm understanding more clearly now that virtually so many aspects of my improvisation contain logical reasoning and an a priori idealization of value structure. It is complicated to speak about, at least with the given musical vocabulary that I have right now, but I think that I can pursue this, that I should write and share with others in a new philosophical language, one that concerns the terminology of musical theory, one that also takes into account my own musical ideas and details them, giving them a sense of purpose and understanding. It excites me to think about doing this. I haven't recognized up until this point that there's actually a great deal of subject matter that's being neglected by my idealistic pursuits, this of course being musical dissertation, and because of this wanting neglect, I think that it is best to pursue this subject and complete more fully this area of ideas. I would have to build, or at least comprehend, studiously, a more complicated and efficient vocabulary, as I've already stated. This would be my only prerequisite before beginning this topic in writing. Anyway, I look forward to sitting down and writing about this sometime. In the meantime, I'm now back from the college, having an additional 17-minute piece recorded that I'm editing right now, and that it should be preserved online within a few hours. It sounds so very ancient. Again, Roman fanfares and barbarian sound is evoked everywhere, although there are bouncing returns to common practice period romanticism, if only to even out any excessive power and might. I wonder about this phrase over and over again when I read from Nietzsche that there has never been a Homer in music. I think that this music that I'm beginning to construct appears very likely to identify to at least to the level of piano or only. Orchestra and singers would be incredible. Basso Polidorus is a prime example. With Nietzsche's musical ideas, one that had never been created up to this point in time in the realm and dimension of classical art music. I shall fill in this gap of my own music, obeying faithfully to whatever his strange and obscure thoughts conceive Homeric music as. I believe very well, perhaps truthfully or falsely, that my music, with all of its details on legitimate execution and predetermined construction, represents affirmatively the objectivity that Nietzsche may have in his mind. It is worth the attempt. It might establish myself as a more or less original musician. It is fun and exciting to do so as well. The music contains, if to be delivered properly, so many traits that speak to the ethical ideal of a joyous monster, rather than the sentimental bore that this philosopher depicts as negative and undesirable to preserve. I could write so much about the subject, so I'll save this for a later time. Perhaps either writing a little about it to Frigg directly, or possibly conceiving my thoughts about this to my book, July 16, 2012. Basically, I've been living at a cabin in the California mountains for almost a year now. I really like it here. The scenery is wonderful, very coniferous. The temperature is generally cooler. The winter has its snowstorms. I usually read and study a lot, write to a couple good friends that I've made online. Both are located in Britain. They are very cultivated and intelligent people. I write philosophical articles every now and then and include them into my book. I have 2 books now, the first one being complete, edited and finished. It is around 800 pages, and the second book is still in the works, at around 600 pages, wherein I plan to have it finished by December of this year, for various spiritual and personal reasons that seem to direct me toward this aim. After I finish the second book, I will likely begin once again a search for a book agent to get my 2 books published. I plan to rewrite my query letter to include the table of contents of both the books to the agent, include a chapter of each, also to write a brief synopsis for both books, to write an outline of each book as well, as professional as possible, in order to increase my potential to succeeding in finding an appropriate agent that will accept my wishes and take my books finally into the publishing process. Other than this task, I tend to record quite frequently these days. I record at least once every week or so. Many of the pieces that I've done can be found online, where they are preserved there for now. July 16, 2012. Here is a recorded piece done on a piano at the college from earlier today, Centurion. It is almost identical in length to the most recent and prior piece, a 70-minute Romanesque festival, a celebration of pagan fanfares, imperial purple, gladiatorial sonic imagery, forum rallies, and public civic cultivation. The second lengthiest piece that I have done so far, in addition to the Romanesque and Germanic spirit of antiquity. This is certainly not for the classically conditioned weak of spirit. There are more fortissimos and accentuations of power throughout this piece than there are any more vain prayers for Christian love and kindness. The beast roars, Tiamat pulls her chains, the joyous monster overcomes the tedious, the very common and sentimental boorishness. Nietzsche's remark, "There has never been a Homer in music." This I aim to dismiss, so I think it, by this evolution of radical perfect fifth chord modulations, dry marble Corinthian columns, antiquated heroic virtue, expressed devotedly their mere pianist's keys. Of course, the music aims at no end, therefore it is not satisfied with its production. It is only to pursue a possession of its own dialectic even further with whatever more shall come. July 16, 2012. I was feeling inspired enough earlier today to record yet another piece, Praetorian, with the fully fledged Roman direction that I have been aspiring toward lately. I wonder that this is going to be everlasting. It is lengthy at more or less 72 minutes of power-absorbed fifths, the occasional soft echo of prior romantic beauty, a return to celebratory fanfare. This piece turns out extremely alive, awake, alert, active. There are many moments where even the mixer tape has its static accents because of the abundant loud clashing of chords. So far, this piece, I think, represents some of the superior elements of this new Nietzschean Homeric style that I have been developing. If only I could take this conception and motivation to the orchestral level. July 18, 2012. I wonder too what Nietzsche has in mind in regard to Homeric music. But I think that my music must be on the right track, as it is immensely modeled after Basil Polydorus and his Conan the Barbarian soundtrack, which this music in the film itself is easily observable as Nietzschean in character and spirit. Therefore, I must be doing something right along the lines of what the philosopher intends to express. I think that this musical direction that I have recently been pursuing will indeed spur me on to greater heights, as it can be similarly treated as a kind of addiction. To conceive and create those peculiar sounds that I found in my recent music, that I'm a fanatic about this and desire to advance this unique style of music more and more. July 18, 2012. I searched through various internet pictures for simply and purely Roman themes, When I came upon this incredible painting, I had literally received chills, for the concept was so identical and similar to what I was looking for. It matched perfectly, and the idea of it, the posture and gesture, the whole scene of the arena, really appears so very powerful, amoral, and perfect, in a term that I tend to look for. I was feeling so inspired lately today that earlier this morning I had recorded yet another piece, again one that clocks in at over 70 minutes, 72 I believe this one is. This newest piece, one that I will upload shortly, sounds so alive. The tone is extremely Roman, and the volume itself is severely powerful and loud. There are many instances when even the mixer recording is experiencing static accents upon the heavy banging of the Titan-like chords. I think that this new work, I may likely entitle it Praetorian, is very close to embodying the greatest piece that I've done so far. I could be wrong about this, of course, especially with what more music there may be to come, but with this music I instantly become awake, alert, fired up and very active. There are many theories that I think about and apply onto my music when I improvise. I desire to write about these theories in detail, as I've said before. I just simply need some extra motivation. July 18, 2012. On a rather more pessimistic note, absolutely no one outside of the company of my two good friends, Frigg and Freya, has ever made a simple recognition or acknowledgement to me of the recent work that I've done. I receive 1 or 2 views at the most, while other artists, mostly mediocre ones at that, are receiving views by the thousands, if not millions. I felt utterly depressed about this condition lately, very discouraged. Sometimes I think about this and wonder whether it is desirable or preferable to even continue my work in writing, music, and such. I don't know if this dilemma will ever change into anything much more positive and satisfying, that I might ever get a chance to rejoice in an audience massive, rewarding enough to create any sense of optimism and hope for my historical preservation. July 2012. This writing speaks for itself. Solitary Crisis and Final Effect. It has its own introduction written within it. However, basically, the entry concerns the recent resentment that I have been feeling due to the zero reception that I have received, in this case for 2 very well improved 70-minute pieces that I have recorded. The solitary state of the artist is painful to always be endured. There are moments of crisis or severe disappointments that attends the failure to receive attention or even acknowledgement. A moment's descent into frustration and well-discerning morbid fantasy suffices well for the regulation of the body's temperament, if only it is to resolve to an understanding that such is his destiny. Neither fate nor chance shall meet with vain fantasy or unlikely generosity for the subject. Knowing this, coupled with knowledge of the indifferent nature of the world, at least as it is necessary to have become, having entered more and more deeply into the Kali Yuga, this restores a fierce temperament to peace and routine equanimity, so long as this knowledge retains its plausibility, credulity, and accordance. July 20, 2012. After finishing this writing, Solitary Crisis' Final Effect, I was very concerned what, if any, response and reaction would be like. I was even feeling a bit afraid that I might incite political violence from party members of whatever kind. I'm hardly political now as it is, though I do retain allusions in my philosophy to the left and right spectrum. However, these are usually much obscured, philosophized, peculiarly and preferably neglected. So far, with the reception from other persons' words, I feel more open to the possibility that I'm not so misunderstood and resented as I so commonly believe. I'm glad that it seems clear to certain others that my mention of practical violence or activity of any kind in disharmony with karma or with dharma is not, of course, desirable to resort to. Neither is in this writing nor in daily temperament whatsoever. I'm a miserably non-violent person in actuality. I think perhaps that just this nice nature of mine in person tends to counterimpose strongly through my writing, my music, most of all, my expression, in general or in many particular cases, that there is a sense of necessary balance. My art consequently becomes hard and coarse because in actuality I'm so incredibly kind, even silly at many times. Perhaps this optimism is insincere, but as I look into deeper dimensions, I try to overcome it. Thus, over time, it seems that every aspect of my character and intellect transforms, leaving even the minor moments in person rather coarsened. Nothing but a quest for harder and harder morality and intellect endures and succeeds. In any event, I will indeed continue to perform and record, regardless of whether I am left neglected, unacknowledged by others or not. July 21, 2012. I was concerned that I might appear to others a bit too angry in this most recent photo, or that it would ward away people because of the seriousness or gravity of the expression. I don't think that this is too much the case, though. I received a good response from certain well-regarded others, especially. July 21, 2012. I'm very glad that Frigg has read my message aloud alongside her husband Itrixod earlier yesterday. I think it is great that we both stand in agreement on those ideas that were expounded in the message, that it cheers his heart because the knowledge that a scholarly, capable individual still exists is enough satisfaction for me to know and to otherwise strive for. I laughed when I read her reaction to a new avatar, that she had almost passed out when she saw it. I thought it was adorable. July 22, 2012. I do think that Frigg knows me by now, enough to know that my new photograph does not harness any resentful intentions, or that it does not possess gravity or seriousness to the point that it should be something to worry about or be afraid of, which it is of course not so. I like my new photograph. I feel that it represents something somewhat of an accomplishment, like that it signifies and embodies the state of mind and spirit that I'm currently within during this point in time, during this month of July. Regarding my history, my town is doing well as always. The weather is very nice, sunny and a little hot. Everything, the conditions of the people here and such are doing very well. I wonder whether I will visit the ocean and beach sometime sooner or later. I did not think about this for quite some time. As my town is somewhat far inland from the beach, it would be a rather adventurous drive to visit the sands, but nevertheless it is not something that I would enjoy doing. July 22, 2012. I've created a few recordings while at the college earlier today, reflecting back on the situation where my many improvisations of mine have been completed for quite a long time, unbroken in between. I decided to play and record some sheet music for once from a few of my favorite composers: Wagner, Liszt transcriptions, Beethoven, Bach. I understand that I'm not a professional pianist, neither am I a virtuoso, or will aspire any more to be one. My performance may contain a few errors here and there, but nonetheless I do feel rather satisfied with my work for the day. There are 6 recordings of sheet music in total performed and finished. July 23, 2012. Today was rather constructive and active. I didn't want to forget to mention that there are 6 new videos preserved online from earlier this morning. These consist this time of sheet music performance, a predetermined playing session of my favorite composers. Selections include various Wagner, Liszt piano transcriptions, mostly of Lohengrin this time. Also there's a recorded a Beethoven sonata, as well as a Bach fugue. I kept the music simple this time, nothing flashy or virtuoso. I would need to practice more if I were to achieve that. These latest composition recordings are much shorter than the typical musical trend that I have been projecting as of late. That is, of recording hour-length pieces, rather the session contains music of at least 7 to 8 minutes for each piece. The shortest piece is at around 4 minutes. July 23, 2012. It's very hot here right now. I, similarly to Frigg, would dream of living far north. No, moment. I, similar to Tor, would dream of living far north in the country in the past. In my case, the location be... Oh, moments. It is very hot here now. I, similar to Frigg, would dream of living far north in the country in the past. In my case, the location being Alaska, hers Scotland. In order to experience the cool weather year-round, and not need to dress in fashionable clothing that pertains to the summer season, of which it never truly represents the identity of us, or expresses our will to bundle up and wear scarves, mittens, and such, of which doing so preserves and shares the essence of our character, through formative and personal means. My wish, I think, is more or less satisfied by living here in the mountains, but of course this situation, in regard to the climate, weather, and such, is nowhere near the extreme degree that it would be living in the far north. July 24, 2012. I rented Ben-Hur and watched the entire thing earlier today, just a few minutes ago, having finished the movie in one sitting. I do enjoy very many aspects of the film. However, I do not lean toward the seemingly very advocated Christian stance that much of the movie, especially toward the end, implies. Nevertheless, I find much inspiration from the film generally. The setting is very authentic in its antiquity. Rome's Imperium shines in all its glory. July 25, 2012. It is hot here today, but it is cooler now in the evening. A little less, but enough to resurrect myself in the pit of fire. I do have another piece recorded from today. It is entitled Imperator. It is kind of a combination of the one-word Roman-themed titles that I have been doing lately. The third part of the set, and rightly so, it being a culmination in a bright and sharp way. The piece is great quality, very clear, intelligently played, and imaginative. A further exploration in the realm and spirit of pagan and Roman art and life. I think that Frigg will really enjoy this piece. I did write a little about it on my channel already. Perhaps during the weekend she may give the piece a little She may give the piece a listen while she paints. She is so right about Ben-Hur and similar movies made during the time. I had no idea that the horses in the film were even killed, most likely during the chariot race scene, I suppose. I love horses very much. It's a good thing that, that legislation has improved over time as a result of the brutality occurring, however. Indeed, I see that a Christian message is of course advocated and affirmed in these kind of films. The Ten Commandments, King of Kings, and such other epics come to mind. I know exactly what part of the movie where Ben-Hur's A Heavenly Choir that she mentions chimes in from the soundtrack. It is what I term the Jesus motif, the spiritual choir that sings whenever he is referenced or appeared. It is really interesting to know that a distant relative of hers shared a part and played some characters in movies of that time. He seems to have been a rather ambitious and well-aspiring man, given the activity that she mentions of him and such, starting the first cricket club and so forth, as she says. July 26, 2012. I've been writing lately, not too much actually as it may appear. I try to write an article at least once every week or so now, but always strive to do more. But I require extra motivation and energy if I'm to do so, which I usually don't have now that I'm older. I do write to my good British friend Frigg every day, however. She and I hold a strong online friendship together. There's another good British friend, Freya, too. She and I write every now and then, but when we do, the messages tend to be rather lengthy, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. It seems to compensate for the less frequent association that the two of us have between each other. The first friend, Frigg, that I mentioned, she and I write more frequently. The messages tend to be shorter, but we know so much about each other that the compactness and succinctness of the messages speak for the depth and knowledge over time that we hold between ourselves. Other than writing, I've been recording music lately. This I've been doing rather frequently. Just today I've returned with a 72-minute recording, of which I'm editing right now and going to preserve online. I don't receive any views from people, however. This has been trying my patience lately, but normally I don't care so much about this. I know that my role is solitary and personal, therefore with a simple work of effort I can be content with it, knowing that everything I reason will is aware and conscious of in its own expression, that this traces back to me and in turn has me understand the absolute universal nature of my character and intellect, alone as far as I can know it in its own void or vacuum, relating relative only to God. July 26, 2012. I had experienced a great time recording earlier this morning in Parator. I think that this is a very sharp piece, especially so as time progresses within it. It is bright and cheerful. At moments. Sometimes there are feelings of grand tragedy that are remembered. There is an abundant swiftness, an almost Christmas-like appeal during some reflective moments, as though flurries of snow gently cascade across the landscape, and folk are about in their scarves and such, shopping for gifts. I think this is a rather strange idea, standing in stark relation to the youthful, warm, and pagan nature of the piece. But, nonetheless, the vision seems to recur in my imagination as I play this music in such a manner. It is another lengthy improvisation, setting in at around 72 minutes. However, I think that this piece contains numerous satisfactorily executed transitions. There is something new in every part. Therefore, I understand to play with the means so that the piece does not become tedious or caricatured. It is a difficult task to achieve with more or less success and approval with an audience. July 26, 2012. My eyes have almost always throughout my life been near to been near to perfect in vision and clarity. Every now and then, if I read or study for a long time, if the room is a little too dark, I do observe that my eyes become a little blurry, but hardly so whatsoever, and soon enough they become clear and perfectly efficient once again. July 28, 2012. My vision is near perfect, and it always has been. Therefore, the only glasses I wear are very, very occasionally sun glasses, and this only when I am driving. If the sun is too much to bear during a sunset or sunrise, as I admit, possess a rather sensitive reaction to sunlight. In this sense, my eyes are rather weak. I do tend to squint outdoors. If that is the case, this has always been a rather mild and not very menacing issue, so I don't think it is anything much to worry about. I love dogs, animals in general, of course, but I have always had a fond understanding of dogs in particular, as I see so much relative Teutonic spirit and fury supplanted within their souls. In addition to this, their general behavior and appearance is simply lovable. I love the quirky little characteristics of dogs, most especially. I miss Nala, the big and beautiful blonde dog that I lived with while growing up. Unfortunately, she's put to sleep now, as she had lived to be a very experienced old age for a typical dog. 16 years it was, and this even for a big-size dog like her is rather rare and commending to say about her health. Eden had a dog too, Petals, a small little dog that I forget the breed she was, but so lovable and quirky in her own little way as well. She was put to sleep almost around the same time Nala was. Petals during February or March of 2010, Nala during April of the same year, July 31, 2012. As it goes for recording another piece, Anno Domini, I must not have been clear on this. I didn't record it yet. It is only an idea and a plan that I have in mind to do so. I was about to record it today, but time passed by and now the college is unfortunately closed until Thursday. I will be better prepared by then, I believe. I'll try to record a piece by Yorte. I think an Old Norse name for my friend's dog would have been splendid, but of course he seems to have had his fair share of names by prior owners already. Nala was loved by my Quebec Walker family indeed. I always felt so saddened that I wished that it moved out for the place when I was young, and couldn't be with her so often as I wished. August 2, 2012. I think that I will indeed write more on this subject soon. I've been caught in a writing mood lately, and I have come across so many conceptual ideas in my thoughts. The subject matter of Eva being a prominent one, although I tend to stick to dramatic writing for the time being. Of course, this does not prohibit any exploration and study of other subject matter. I do have the quintet in my own possession. It is a Kubelik recording. He is the conductor. Faulkner is, in my opinion, many others too, the greatest romantic. His music represents almost a soundtrack to the fall and demise of the Western Empire, at least insofar as political philosophy is concerned, which is the heaviest measurement. There are little love arias in Lohengrin, Tristan und Isolde, The Ring, Der Meistersinger von Nürnberg, and so forth, melodies everywhere in his music that speak of the cycle of love and death. There is a great mystery to his music, one that uncovers and awakens the Holy Spirit for his listeners, as though the wind blows and the subject receives a chill. This, at times, can lead him far enough to tears, even convulsion, if the moment is right. August 2, 2012. I tend to study the Kabbalah along with the Tarot, astrology, alchemy, numerology as well, following my intuition that leads to occult knowledge of my own phenomenon as such, at least insofar as magic occult interests are concerned. I've amassed a good-sized library of philosophical books, studying from them for several years now, from philosophers like Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Hegel, Hobbes, Hume, Spinoza, the ancient Greek philosophers such as Aristotle, Plato, some historians like Herodotus, Thucydides, Tacitus, Plutarch. I have this one good-sized occult book by Israel Regardie. I see him ranked alongside Crowley and Levy, called The Golden Dawn, which is a seemingly complete course book of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's theoretical and practical belief system, up until the Adeptus Minor grade, I think. I don't believe he desired against the best wishes of other magicians to reveal information from the higher grades, but that would be so enlightening, I think. Perhaps as the years have passed, other writers have revealed more on the higher grades. I do recall a couple of writers detailing concepts such as sex magic, which is knowledge given to higher occult grades, but I don't know much about the details of it currently. As far as my writing style is concerned, it has evolved over time, particularly starting from later 2006, from rather curious eccentricities of style, utilizing the dash to end every one of my sentences. Periods were never used, as though the thoughts were continuously searching for something infinite and eternal, never meaning to end the process. During this time, up until around more or less 2010, paragraph breaks were used frequently, so much so that I think that this occurrence transformed the writing method of deliverance from paragraph breaks and all to what is commonly seen in the current phase or aeon of my writing, which is long-winded thoughts, thoroughness of reason, completion of grammar, and so forth. The period came back into use around this time, signaling the end of philosophical searching for knowledge prior to this time, as age and experience were finally acquiring sufficient accumulation. Anything can happen, of course, with sufficient reason. Therefore, I don't judge even this phase or aeon as something final or everlasting. It is merely one aspect of endless ongoing expression, whether my body dies and recovers its knowledge in another additional life, or it changes over time while still manifest within itself. So, indeed, this writing style does have a rather personal purpose, a very internal one. It is intrinsic and spiritual. I normally spend a good deal of time thinking about things, questioning even myself on my own morality and evaluations to a good degree, enough to mark a generous transvaluation of my own morals, when, prior to 2006, my philosophy was one of short-sighted wickedness and evil, and after this time it was as though my command began tolerating more liberal or Christian morality and intellect, if only to clear my mind enough within the wilderness that I was desiring to achieve, and to recover a good portion of sanity that I otherwise would not experience had I continued intellectualizing with others in the postmodern empires with very sharp, war-like and fringe political elements. August 4, 2012. I thought about a few things, coming from my own threshold of knowledge, which relates to a few ideas that Frege thinks of, at least from what I subjectively apprehend here. Spinoza's pantheism, as well as the doctrine of panentheism, coming to mind that stands in relation to the subject matter that's spoken about, on the void and God's objectification of it, that this void objectivity is not evidently a total account of his godliness, that he is infinitely structured like a fractal, with the atoms representing universes, the greater image that these atoms make up being possibly the Platonic realm of ideas or forms, which this philosopher frequently draws reference toward. I'm learning to preserve my energy from prolonged habitation in the external dimension, or at least, if this is not possible, then merely by utilizing or commanding it wisely, with as much reason as I think right and stable to follow. Earlier in my past, during my new wave of spiritual philosophy, this new magic that I had within my soul was deep and overflowing. I had scared away so many people because of it. They simply do not understand such a thing. Nowadays, further in the evolution of my new, nobler philosophy, my spirit is under greater control. Perhaps it possesses less youthful magic. It acquires a greater delineation of wisdom and experience as I become older, more comprehensive of my history and more resigned. I have a very characteristic Taurus, with much Gemini flightiness embedded within intellect, due to my birthday being right on the cusp of the Gemini twins, May 20th. Therefore, there follows a distinct amalgamation of heavy, grave seriousness alongside these lofty and musical thoughts. August 5, 2012. Keylontic science sounds rather interesting to read into. I think that I recall a reference here or there made in some of my friends' earlier writing entries in regard to the subject. The proposition of there being two harmonic universes, I assume that this is the limit for what I read here, with the primary and archetypal universe being more or less the realm of the ideal soul or spirit, along with the secondary, subsequent, more concrete universe being the realm of the real. This seems to find harmony and agreement with my philosophy. For a time, I had considered the notion that there are several distinct grades or degrees of God, or his levels of universal substance, conventionally corresponding to the sephiroth of the Kabbalah, or possibly to the 12 signs of the zodiac, with Keter Arius being the summit of spiritual endeavor, with Malkut Piscis representing the first conception of the formation of a spirit's journey through experience and its following metempsychosis. I read from Plotinus a little earlier that perhaps there are in fact 3 realms or grades of spiritual manifestation. The first being the conscient thing in itself, unknowable of course, and represents the form or possibly forms that lie beyond the threshold of the subjects of spiritual reflection. The second being the subject himself, rather his body, his will, character, and intellect, that of which terminates itself at the edge of the subject's flesh. Here he is represented a priori. Perhaps this is the time and place wherein the Son of God derives his purity from, only to tarnish this most inconceivable expression with the consequential objectification of the a posteriori experience, the reflection and mirrors reception of plural arbitration, the principle of individuation. This latter description seems to account for the third aspect, or realm, of the particular theory of universal grades. I think that this system can harmonize well with the theory of the twin harmonic universes, where perhaps the thing in itself grade, along with parts of the pure intellect Son of God grade, fall into the description given of the ideal harmonic universe, two-soul matrix. Perhaps the remaining parts of the pure intellect grade, along with the grade of experience, real matter, concrete arbitration, in sum, the principium individuationis, the principium individuationis, together fall into the description that is common of the harmonic universe one incarnate matrix. I state this merely to demonstrate the common relative connectivity between cosmological epistemology, be it especially so if whatever theories that are mentioned are serving toward advancement and creative evolution, which I see here is such the case with her theories that she shares, whether they belong to her or are derived from somewhere else. I say that I had scared away so many people because of the new magic that I had inherited during later 2006, simply for my intellect had become radically altered and transformed during this time toward a motivation that was rather death-oriented, newly resigned, and longing for rest. These characteristics evidently, at least from personal experience, do not harmonize well with the rather vain, naive, and incredibly active and childish exuberance revealed in so many of the characters of the postmodern Western spirits. These individuals that seem to have migrated from the pirate life sentences of the Holocaust victims and various other sources that consequently distorted and corrupted the order and symmetry of the Western spirit's chronology. Now, in my age, the spirit merely tries to forget itself and all of its impractical accomplishments, while it unconsciously instigates its final hedonistic rupture before being overcome and dominated by unknown and inferior conceptual elements. I stand in relation to them as old and wise, as they stand in relation to me as young and foolish. The consequential conversation between ourselves simply does not harmonize or agree positively. As divergent morality between the two opposite aspects establish themselves, I become more and more master-oriented. They become more and more slave-oriented. I affirm reality, severity, morbidity, perversity. They affirm hope, faith, charity, kindness toward inferiors, and so forth. My severity rests with the negation of these latter morals. I would need to write more on this subject to describe more completely just what it is that had scared away people in the past because of my new magic, which this magic, I assert, represents merely a freshly conceived transformation from perpetual evil, wickedness, hatred, and such, toward a vague and dubious toleration of good folk, spiritual kindness, and rest from prior innumerable political philosophical negations. This transformation came about undesirably. As well, it was never fully gained with wholehearted sincerity. Hence, later in my life, I tended to revert more and more vehemently to the affirmation of evil, idealizing the ways of my past prior to later 2006. The transformation was undesirable, as I had thought so deeply and thoroughly that in effect I had brought about my transformation as though I were a slave to it, and determined to complete its logical effects, whether I wished it or not. The creation of my new spirit, or new wave of spiritual philosophy, as I referred to it, certainly represented very peculiar and distinct elements. Anyhow, I frequently become ever the more skeptical as I think about everything, simply for I cannot any longer settle onto one fixed side of the universal spectrum sincerely. This seems to be the case for many individuals that seemingly think of things through to their end. Their deliberations eventually move from side to side unsettled. Power becomes desired as an effect of prolonged unresolved deliberation. However, left and right, north and south, odd and even, and so on, are merely two sides of the same stamp. It is impossible to express two thoughts, one at the same time. However, such a thing is desired by the philosopher, yet never legitimately achieved. I will indeed try to acquire my birth chart, as doing such a thing is something metaphysical that I have always desired to achieve, in order to place symbolism into my philosophy, and draw upon its knowledge when desired, during a train of thought, a process of logic, or while writing an article, for instance. Anyhow, I've known a couple of very magnificent friends and relatives in my life that were either Cancer and Leo, but were not both signs so close together in unison. August 6, 2012. I'll be recording a new piece within several hours once the college opens during this morning. Also on Odin's Day, I'll be heading down to my Kopecki father's town, where I will visit him for a couple of days while I take my car in to get it fixed at an auto shop. My Quebecy father thankfully offers me to pay for this. The car, the cart, the horse, the steed. Sleipner is in need of a good fix right now. August 7, 2012. Here is another lengthy piece, Sol Invictus, inspired initially by the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, only to morph into different aspects, motivated by miscellaneous music influences. It is notably more cheerful and playful than the more recent recordings. Not much pedal is used. There is a less ideal emphasis on Roman aesthetic this time, but with a more peaceful communion between simpler notes and pleasant silence. August 7, 2012. I'll be getting ready in the morning and head out to drive 90-something miles to my Quebecy father's place, wherein I'll be staying with him for a couple of days, probably until Frig Day or Hirner's Day. The reason for this visit with him is merely to get Sleipner fixed and checked up on. He is offering to pay expenses for me, which I'm so very grateful for his assistance. My computer will be brought with me. I'll set it up in my old room, get the internet running by the afternoon. My Quebecy father can be so nice sometimes. I haven't seen him in person for almost a year, but we email each other every several days. We have been doing so ever since I had moved out. Anyway, there's a new piece uploaded onto my account. It is named Sol Invictus, rather than the previously considered Anno Domini. This latter name will likely be the title of my next piece. I found some excellent photos of an imagined ancient Roma done by some very exceptional painters and photographers for the movie Quo Vadis. I myself haven't seen this movie, but I have listened to some of the soundtrack and gained bits of information from the film, and I must say that it looks very promising. I wonder if Frigg has any personal thoughts about the movie that I should know beforehand, like she had shared with me earlier on Ben-Hur and the horse cruelty that I wasn't aware about until she had spoken to me about this. The latest piece isn't so Roman-inspired this time, although there are a few passages that bear a faithful example to that Roman aesthetic that I commonly have had in mind in regard to my music that has been played during these past few months. The piece is rather quiet, especially playful. There's a sense of pleasant silence ringing beyond the notes, with reminiscences of Beethoven's sonatas. August 8, 2012. I've made the long drive safely and soundly. It was a difficult and rather awkward drive, as it is known the overlying purpose of this visit is for Sleipner repairs. This 90-mile drive down roads and freeways was the final test as I like it to conceive it as. It was very tricky for Sleipner as it possesses no turn signals. I'm certain that I had irritated or even enraged a couple of drivers when I needed, out of last resort, I stayed in the furthest right lane as much as I could to turn into the driving lane, if only to avoid otherwise mandatory exit routes or necessary lane junction. Today has been exhausting. My computer is up and running. The car is at the shop right Sleipner is at the shop right now, actually. I've told the shop owner everything that needed to be told. I walked back home after the drop-off. What an inferno this town is. I had drank these 2 water bottles almost immediately when I came here, and also returned for my walk. The temperature may indeed be a little over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Such a change in setting with a much cooler climate in my homely mountain region. So much more preferable there, I think. The townsfolk in this city are horrendous, by the way. This city is far from a social community. It lacks all in any sense of good fortune and dialectical happiness. Its condition, I see, can easily be driving my Quebecy father mad currently. In any event, I'll be here possibly until Frig Day, maybe Hirner's Day, depending on when the mechanics get the Sleipner fixed. I'm so thankful for my Quebecy father once again helping me with the bill. I don't think I could in any way afford it on my own with my current monetary situation. My hometown is far from crime-ridden. I easily feel safe enough leaving the door or the wooden door open and unlocked as unmentionable and unutterable as and I do this over the summer season with the screen door closed in front of it, of course in order to keep bugs out and such the best that I can. I was writing to Frigg so much, in the proper, more thorough way, as we say, for we haven't detracted much, if at all, from simpler briefer messages, which I believe represents a good sign of the longevity and eternal recurrence of our companionship. She will always be on my mind, as she is now and has been for months on end. She's a prime example of my own ideal woman, one striven for years, seemingly unable to attain it, to realize it or objectify its own potential. Circumstances in all matter and form obstruct ourselves and deny anything much from resembling further intimacy or proclaimed and declared mutual companionship and partnership, of course, in the monogamous and bona fide bona fide sense, from achieving anything more than what this permits of us, reality and practical communion, which is as it is, of course, it still remains a blessing and a great bestowal of good fortune and spiritual reward. Sol Invictus in perpetuity. August 8, 2012. I checked into an astrology website that produces birth charts. I learned that my ascendant rising sign is in fact 1 degrees Scorpio, with the sun in Taurus and the moon somewhere in Pisces. I must say, the description that I was given, particularly in regard to the most significant signs, was almost spot on and correctly reflective of my own character and intellect. I was told that I am quiet, reserved, secretive, difficult to understand, that my will is deep, I'm stubborn and tough, my life must be experienced intensely and totally, quite courageous. I'm willing to take calculated risks. I'm easily hurt, sensitive, curious, concerned with the deeper mysteries of human psychology. I pursue subjects that I'm interested in with total fanaticism and so forth. All these signs and details, I think, portray me very legitimately and faithfully. Looking at my astrology chart was a first for me. Honestly, I had a little trouble understanding it or acclimating to its design, but thankfully the site that I received it from had given a rather thorough description of what the particular chart means. I tend to study Kabbalah with loyalty and restriction toward the Golden Dawn. OTO initiates, such as Aleister Crowley, Israel Regardie, Dion Fortune, as well as others such as Eliphas Levi, John Dee, Helena Blavatsky, and so forth. I utilize the 10 Sephiroth in connection with the Tetragrammaton, the nuclear family, the classical elements, the alchemical substances in astrology, the tarot cards, with their inner paths between Sephirah emanations, and so forth. With the tarot, I have studied the Hebraic alphabet, with correlation between the 22 letters to each of the tarot trump cards. These cards contain correspondence with the zodiac and the planets and such. The Rider-Waite deck in particular is painted with a tremendously deep and elaborate symbolism within general parts of the cards. Still to this day, I am astonished at some of the secrets and mysteries that appear behind their phenomena when I am able to reveal them or understand a detail or intention more clearly and completely. I see myself rather aligned during my current spiritual aeon in the Chokmah Sephirah, which is related to fatherliness, wisdom, and pretty much many parts of the austere and highest grade before the unveiling of the unknown thing in itself, sphere of the crown, God as totality, Keter itself. For a long time, I thought that my character was aligned in Binah's grade, the dark understanding. August 10, 2012.